Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to continue our exploration of the pitch block and look at the Arpeggiator today. At the moment, I've got a rectifier preset set up. It sounds like this. All right, let's get going. I'm going to bring up a pitch block in front of the amp this time, and we can go to the effect type and select Arpeggiator. Now, let's do a very brief overview of the controls. You can see here you've got this control run, which we will talk about in a second. We've got tempo, which is going to control the tempo of the Arpeggiator relative to the BPM that we've programmed in with the preset, and then we control the number of stages. Now, we have got up to 24 stages in the Arpeggiator here, and you can see here that each stage has a preset shift. So the idea is going to be that we dial in the number of stages we want, and then we can set where each stage goes to. We can have it go to a different note. So shift the initial note to a brand new note So shifting the initial note to a brand new note up to 24 times in a particular run. So I don't know if you're familiar with Stranger Things, but that was one of my favorite TV shows that's come out in the last year or two on Netflix. And if you have seen it, you'd be really familiar with the intro music, which is using an arpeggiator on a synthesizer to play a major seventh arpeggio. And I figured it would be pretty fun to use the arpeggiator block to recreate that arpeggio and play around with it. So that's what we're going to do. Let's keep going through the master section. We've got mix, level, balance. The sort of usual controls are in this tab here. We've also got a low cut and a high cut frequency. And some really important stuff here, the amplitude shape and the pan shape, they come in handy for crafting tones. And then most importantly, we've got the scale section. What I'm going to do here is set the scale to chromatic for our purposes, just so that we can see what the actual sequencer section does in the arpeggiator. I'm going to set the mix to 100% so that we can really hear what's going on. All right, let's stick with 4 stages. To start with, just to give you a demonstration, I'm going to set the tempo to 8th notes, and let's play around with this shift. So because we're using a chromatic scale, each number here corresponds to 1 semitone. So let's just do a simple chromatic run. Stage 1 can be 1 semitone, stage 2 can be 2, nothing too exciting or interesting here, and then we'll go stage 4. All right, let's play a note and have a listen to what happens there. So the arpeggiator is actually playing a run. It's taking my initial note, which is a low D, and it's shifting it by 1 semitone, then 2 semitones, then 3 semitones, then 4 semitones in time with this tempo. If I increase the tempo, say to a 16th note, so now that we've got that set up, let's take the number of stages to 8, and let's think about a major 7th arpeggio. The first interval is going to be, I'm going to leave that as just the note that I'm playing. Then we'll go for major 3rd, which is 4 semitones, up to a 5th, which is 7 semitones. We're going to play a major 7th, which is 11 semitones. We'll then play the octave, and then we'll come back down. So we'll just repeat this stuff on the way back down. And that gives us the familiar arpeggio. Let's have a listen. Now we can play around with a few things in the master section. This amplitude shape is quite fun. This is going to, if I change the amplitude alpha, let's take that to 16%. And let's have a listen to what that does with a constant amplitude. So you probably notice that that is not doing anything because we've got the amplitude set to constant. If we go to something like sine, this is going to vary the amplitude by an amount proportional to this number I've chucked in here, according to a sine curve. So if this is quite low, have a listen. The volume is going to go up and down a little bit. So I find that low settings for this are quite useful. If we go through some of the other amplitude shapes. So essentially what this control here, the amplitude shape control, is doing for each note in our run that we're doing, it's allocating it a volume. So this is really cool. You can do so many dynamic things with this. And obviously, you know, if you set this to a different scale, you can go crazier. I just prefer chromatic because it gives me a one-to-one correspondence between this number here and the number of semitones that I'm shifting. If you prefer, if you know you're playing in the key of A major or something like that and you just want to have some fun and move these numbers around, it will keep it in key, which is really cool. So that's one way to use it. I like the sort of more precise method of doing it where I can program in a particular run or a particular arpeggio and take it from there and just go one-to-one with the semitones here. So one thing that you can do is you can leave this block on and you can assign a modifier to run to turn it on and off, which is kind of cool. You can go from this. And the glide time control does this. Basically, the glide time is controlling the kind of ramp up or ramp down between each stage of pitch shifting. Okay, so that's how we can use that to get that arpeggio from Stranger Things. I've got a preset here that I played around with where I took a synth block, set to a square wave, and then I've got an arpeggiator with that particular arpeggio program in. Then I've got two filter blocks here assigned to an expression controller. I've got a high pass and a low pass. So I can just hit the low string here, and if we have a look at what the filters do, I'm going to control the filters by hand, and we get this kind of sweeping thing happening. It's really fun. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on the Arpeggiator effect type in the pitch block. We can talk about the synth block in a later tutorial. I need to do a little bit more familiarizing with the synth block, I think, in the future. But yeah, there you go. You can do so many other cool things with the Arpeggiator. Yeah, play around with things like, you know, basically virtual shredding. If you set it to 2 stages and 2 notes, you can go nuts and set the tempo really high and, you know, do impossible guitar stuff, or you can do sort of synthier stuff like we've had a look at here. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing. Cheers.